Hi everyone, it's Ren here. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to my room. As you can see, I have turned into a younger man because I decided to shave and go to the hairdresser. Bit of a refreshing moment for me. You always kind of need these moments, so that happens. In this video, I'm going to try to improvise a little exercise where I'll take the 16 personality types. This is totally improvised, by the way. I just literally had this idea because I was wondering whether I could make a video today, but I was sort of lacking the inspiration. So I spent quite a bit of time reflecting in front of this camera there, like this, until the idea came. And I moments, something else. What is the cause? I don't know. The fact of the matter is, I had the idea. And so the idea is to look at the 15 other types that are not INFJ and to try to see, like, all right, what does that type have in common with the INFJ? What is the trait that comes first? So I'm going to try and come up with stuff shared in common. Not technical personality traits like functions or, whatever, like references to Enneagram or anything. Just literal, ordinary language words that I would use to describe a person, okay? So we'll start with ISFJ, okay? And we'll proceed in that way. So if I had to try to summarize what the INFJ has in common with the ISFJ, I would say a certain form. I would say, as people, I think in both cases, ISFJs and INFJs has a certain form of striking immediate kindness, I would say. That's the first thing I would emphasize. What does the INFJ have in common with the ISTJ? Well, that's a tough one, because I used to work with an ISTJ, and we had a lot of conflicting positions. But I would say that both the INFJ and the ISTJ need a frame to function within. Now, the frame of the ISTJ is tends to be a lot more structured and detailed, whereas the INFJ likes to float about within the frame, have a lot of creative freedom within the frame. Now, an ENFP would not like that frame as much. It would kind of burden their freedom, and an ENTP very much the same. INFJ can be very creative, but just like the ENFJ, there's a need for a frame. So that's what I can find in common with the ISTJ. I know it's something that I could have also mentioned for the ISFJ, but it's not the first thing that strikes me in regard to the ISFJ. It's more the immediate kindness. So need for some frame in common with the ISTJ. Now, in common with the ESFJ, I would say that the INFJ, in common with the ESFJ, is what's the thing that ESFJs and INFJs have the most in common? I would say social awareness. And what does the INFJ have most in common with the ESTJ? Not much, not much. I would say liking to complete their tasks, okay? Now, what does the INFJ have most in common with the ISFP? I would say having an artsy side, yeah, being artistic, creative. INFJs are usually quite creative, like the ISFPs. And it's often an artistic side that takes them a while to share with others before they do that. And it has a strong sort of, and that comes from SEUs, a strong sort of external environment dimension, a manipulation of form dimension, except that I think that for the ISFP, that often tends to be the end goal, the glorification, the worship of the beauty of form. Whereas I think for the INFJ, a lot of the time, this worship of the beauty of form is not an end. Form is meant to represent an NI insight, to give it some kind of body, and to detail it first to themselves and then to others. With the ISTP, what does the INFJ have in common with the ISTP? Well, there's a lot in common function-wise, that's for sure. In practice, though, the INFJ and the ISTP, I think that maybe what they have in common is a certain form of individualism. It is more obvious in the case of the ISTP, of course, but the INFJ can be quite individualistic also. What does the INFJ have in common with the ESFP? I would say that when an INFJ is drunk, they can come across as an ESFP. And what does the INFJ have in common with the ESTP? I think that when an INFJ is drunk, no, but not only when they're drunk, but actually an INFJ and an ESFP, an ESTP, I think that what they can have in common is that if the INFJ is unusually confident, that happens, they can have a charm that is not altogether unlike that of the ESTP, except that it will be a little bit less in your face, perhaps. Now, what does the INFJ have most in common with, so we're moving towards the N types now. So what does the INFJ have most in common with INTJs? I would say the otherworldliness and very long-term dimension of their vision for life. What does the INFJ have in common with the ENFJ? I would say, so for the ESFJ I said social awareness, so I cannot use that in relation to the ENFJ. I would say, what does the INFJ have in common with the ENFJ? I would say a vision in which people play a big role, relationships with others, intersubjectivity plays a big role. What does the INFJ have in common with the ENTJ? I would say it's a little bit like the INTJ, but rather than the otherworldliness of their vision, I would say in the case of the ENTJ, I think what the INFJ has in common with the ENTJ, and both types can appreciate that of one another, is the ferociousness with which they stick to their vision no matter what. Yes. Now, what does the INFJ have most in common with the INFP? I would say their emotional astuteness and empathy and sensitivity, although it comes from different places. In common with the INTP, I would say their contemplative and critical nature and outlook on the world and being in the world. So there's two more types and then we're done. So what does the INFJ have most in common with the ENFP? I would say what the INFJ has most in common with ENFP. I would say an inner child. ENFP manifests it outwardly. The INFJ manifests it more privately, more inside their mind. They manifest it outside, they vocalize it when they're in the presence of people they trust, people they're comfortable with, people that they love. But there's very much an inner child in the INFJ and in the ENFP. Expressed differently, but it's very present. And now, what does the INFJ have in common with the ENTP? Big questioners of things, and that has to do with the fact that they both use TI and that they're both N dominant. So they come to a question and they want to ask the question, you have a state of affairs. Both of them being N dominance and TI users will say, yeah, but why is it like this? Now, the INFJ approach will be driven by NI, so usually they already will have the answer, and the goal will be to find a way to express what the answer is. Whereas the ENTP will less often have already the answers, will like shoot in a lot of different directions very flexibly, very nimbly, and arrive at an answer out of the exploration of these different directions. And so that is more or less the total summary of comparisons that I can think about to emphasize not what makes the INFJ so unique among other types, but rather what they have in common, not just with certain types, but with each different type. Because I think that maybe that's an interesting approach to have, considering that there tends to be so much emphasis on just, you know, not from all different quarters, but like, you know, in the literature or online, you know, there's so much emphasis on how singular and sort of snowflake-like and unicorn-like the INFJ is. Maybe taking the approach that emphasizes in what way the INFJ is not unique can be an interesting one and a beneficial one for the INFJs themselves, who after all are usually animated by a profound desire and need, existential, metaphysical need to connect with others, including non-INFJs. Offer me your own suggestion, guys. We'd be very curious to hear what you have to propose for the various types and what they have in common with INFJs. See you soon. Have a lovely Sunday. No, actually, today is Saturday. Yes, lost track of time. Have a lovely Saturday night and have a great Sunday too. See you soon. Ciao.